You're already seated. I don't have to say that again. Please give me a drink. Last week we celebrated water, explaining its importance. Over 50% of the human body weight is comprised of it. We can only survive between 3 and 5 days without it. Now, Jesus and his team are on their way to Jerusalem, going through Samaria. Seemingly strangers in a strange land, Samaritans and Jews. But Jesus is thirsty, and he sees a woman at the well. And this totally reconfigures the relationship or the power dynamic, asking for water. After all, Jesus is a man and she's a woman. He's a Jew, she's a Samaritan. They don't get along. There's a power dynamic between men and women. He's relatively powerful coming into town, and she is powerless. She was broken, yet is asked to make Jesus whole. He asks her for water. They have a conversation about living water and the water he is asking for. This living water is akin to life in the Spirit, to shed fear, judgmentalism, to see the sacredness of all people, and to practice peace and to practice patience. And this is powerful, to be sure, because Jews would see Samaritans as terrorists. I'm getting a lot of sound from the back. I'm getting sound from the back. It's hard to concentrate. I apologize. Where are we? It's been a struggle. This is powerful because Jesus would see Samaritans as terrorists because of throwing dead bodies in the temple. That is an act of terrorism back in the day. I'm going to tell you straight out. It's as bad as anything we can imagine in our culture. The fact that people would take dead bodies, throw them in the temple, that is a desecration of greatness, and it happened because of the Samaritans. Now, if you were around during the day of Jesus, around the temple, the prayers there are a lot of different public prayers, but one of the public prayers that you would hear is, God bless all people except those Samaritans. That's the way it worked. No peace between a Samaritan and a Jew. But with all that said and all that background, Jesus goes into the enemy territory, so to speak. He moves from Galilee into Samaria and then on to Judah, but he's going into, in a sense, a foreign land with a culture that is not overly excited to see someone like him. But here's the thing. Jesus does not see Samaritans as terrorists. Oh, there might have been a few that threw some dead bodies a couple years ago in the temple, but he does not cast that aspersion on all Samaritans. He sees people. He sees a land. And that's how Jesus sees things. And he fights against that anger about Samaritans and judging Samaritans as terrorists. Matter of fact, he constructs maybe his greatest story about compassion called the Good Samaritan. And I want to tell you, that story told in that time was an act of overwhelming courage to make a Samaritan the head, the hero of the story. Well, with all that said, here he is at this well, and he continues to talk with her. He needs a drink of water, and what he does is he overwhelms her with his own knowledge of who she is. He sees her, he knows her, he understands who she is, and this blows her right away. But with that said, he still needs some water. The guy's thirsty. And she has access to what he needs, eh? And the sad part of this story, we don't see her giving Jesus the water. We don't see the refreshment it would have brought Jesus. And that's too bad. It's a story that John missed an opportunity to construct a little bit further, because what we understand is that the way we do peace work, we recognize we're all equal and we're sharing in a variety of different ways. The woman fed Jesus that day. He needed what she had. But with that said, in any event, as the story goes on, she's enthusiastic about the exchange. She goes into town, she tells others, and she leads many to follow Jesus. And in the end, the story demonstrates that unity is always possible 100% of the time if we practice the peace. If we practice the peace, anything can happen. It's the recognition as followers of Jesus that every human being on planet Earth is worthy of God's love. Every human being on planet Earth is sacred, and that we are all brothers and sisters in creation, trying to share the love of God in the midst of a world that is too often managed by people who have very little interest in that. And that means we are invited to see people as sacred. So the question is, how do we practice this peace? Jesus practices the peace 100% of the time. That's what he teaches. And to be honest, in a world of present war, more war comes at us. That is hard to see. Now Jesus gives us a clue. He saw that Samaritan woman, that so-called terrorist, as worthy of God's love. And it means that we can begin to ask the question, how are we to share God's love with all people? Even our so-called enemies that we're taught to hate. How do we share God's love with people from different lands, faiths, or beliefs? Jesus makes it abundantly clear that we are to love our enemies. It's a key teaching, and there's no way around it. So how do we share God's love? With all kinds of different people, including immigrants that are fighting for a better life. If Jesus were here right now, would he support the war? With everything you know about Jesus, would he endorse a war? The answer is no. You see, an act of war is a rejection of God's peace. I reject thee. It's not possible. And leaders who call for war are the ones that demonstrate that rejection, not the soldiers. It's not the soldiers' fault. I want to be clear about that. I stand with the soldiers. He would practice, so this is what Jesus would do. He would practice patience, peace. Rather than drop bombs in foreign lands, Jesus would walk into the foreign land and ask the leader for a cup of water. Sadly, we're brought up and we all learned this in elementary school, so they ain't saying anything new. We live in a guns and butter economy. That's how we were built. More guns, more butter. The butter part's not so bad. Dropping bombs is not sharing God's love with the world. I hesitate to bring this up, but I'm going to anyway, and it ties back into war, and it's certainly the biggest war we've fought in our lifetime, or, well, in the last 30 years or something. But during 9/11, we lost 3,000 Americans, thereafter. And I remember doing work in Manhattan 2 months after just on that issue with a mission, dealing with the aftermath of that. Beth and I have been to the memorial in Pennsylvania, and it blew my mind how powerful that is. And the heroism that took place on that plane that day. I've been to the Pentagon, and I've seen that, and I understand all that. But you know what our response was? And this is important to understand. Our response was a war that caused 4 million deaths. 4 million. 2 categories. 1 million direct deaths and 3 million indirect. And trust me, you want to be a direct death. You don't want to be an indirect death. You don't want to go through the pain and suffering that you would go through having been injured, having no food, having no water, having nothing, and then die. I'd take the first million. Israel, in a response to an attack that killed 3,000 people, which was absolutely awful, responds by killing over 80,000. So, in God's economy, the question might be asked, exactly who is the terrorist? But the cosmic Jesus is here in the midst of the bombing, particularly the innocents of Gaza and Ukraine and those in Iran, to name a few. And that is a very good thing that he is present, even at the time of death. The challenge we have as followers of Jesus is to stand with Jesus in times of war, to put a stop to the war, to call for cool heads. Jesus taught patience. That was the earmark of the whole church forever. Patience. Take one step at a time. And today he shatters a barrier by asking help from a Samaritan woman that he no longer sees as a terrorist. And he might ask us today, what barriers are we ready to shatter as we partner with God in his creation? That is the question. And the answer lies within the good news. Peace on earth, goodwill to all. Amen.